So we're going to start with a really simple still life. Maybe it looks more simple than it's going to feel, but we want to start with simple shapes. So I selected a lemon, and then I decided we're going to do 2 lemons so we can play with a little bit of reflection. I chose blue to contrast with a lemon because blue is almost on the opposite side of the color wheel from yellow. The true opposite of this kind of yellow would be a violet, but blue, being a cool color and close to violet, creates some really nice contrast. Yellow, that really bright yellow of a lemon, is considered, of course, a primary yellow, but it's also a very warm or even a hot color. So it's really fun to play with cool and warm or cool and hot together. So this would be more like a hot and a cool. I want to start with describing the canvas. So we're going to talk about the canvas here. This is a 1.5 inch thickness canvas. It's actually wood. This is primed. It's covered with gesso, Gesso, not J. And that is a surface. It's a kind of a white pigment that prepares the canvas for painting. I prefer wood, and some of you are going to prefer fabric canvas. And probably more available to you would be stretched canvases. I like to have some thickness on the side, but you can really inexpensively buy a set of 10 8x10 flat canvas boards, and we have an example of canvas boards in our photographs, our still photographs in the class, so you can see what those look like. But I like wood because it doesn't bounce, and some people love canvas because it does have a little give. So we're going to start on this primed canvas board, and we're going to just look at some of the basic shapes, and we're going to look at what a composition is and what a picture plane is. So we've got all this space around this composition, but we are confined to a rectangular 8x10 format. So with this format, we're going to be looking at how everything fits within the picture plane, and the picture plane is this surface. So we've got to fit this into this. And this actually provides a beautiful structure. So I want to see what kind of point of view we're going to have from this when we look at the painting. So I might make those lemons a little bit larger, and I'm going to decide where my horizon line is, or where the back edge of that blue rectangle is back here. And I think I'll make a line maybe about here, and then I'm going to paint these lemons in around here. And I'm going to start with just simple line. And if we look at the palette, I have the primary colors. I have the red, the yellow, and the blue, and I have the black and white also. And I'm going to start probably with an orange to kind of sketch in the composition. So I'm going to start with what is called just kind of the basic layout for the composition. I'm dipping in the solvent, which is the Gamsol, and a tiny bit into the linseed oil, and I'm just going to get all the excess off. And then I'm going to, actually first, why don't I mix an orange? That would be helpful. Get an orange mixed here. Looks like I have a little bit of green in there. That's going to be okay. Makes for a little bit deeper orange. I've already got my brush kind of preloaded, and I'm using my little filbert that I love so much. And I'm going to sketch in the lemons. So I want to get that basic circular shape, and I'm not worried about a perfect circle. This is paint, so you can move paint around. There's a little bit from where I'm sitting, and it might not be what you see. There's a little bit of space in between the lemons. So I'm going to show a little bit of that space there, and that they're facing different directions. Move that over there just a little bit. And then I'm going to decide where my horizon line is, and from where I'm sitting, again, a different perspective than you're seeing on the camera, I'm seeing a little bit of a line back here, and it kind of goes through this lemon here, goes behind it. I'm gonna let this lemon come up over that horizon line. Okay. Okay, so now we're gonna look for contrast. I'm gonna take this yellow that I've got, and I'm going to mix it with some white. So let me put that brush down. I'm cleaning off the palette knife with the t-shirt. And I'm gonna go, first of all, with my lightest light. And I don't want to put too much on it, but I'm gonna just kind of go over here and just get some of these lighter areas. Again, I'm using my filbert just for sketching right now. I'm not laying down a ton of paint. I'm gonna mix it. Oop, I'm pulling a little white in there too. I'm gonna tell you honestly, I use my brush for a lot of mixing, and sometimes abandon the palette knife once I kind of get going. Okay, now what we have going on over here, so I'm going to add a little bit more white to this. And again, I don't want it to be too thick because I want the option to just kind of change things. But I'm going to add a little more white to that right there. So we know this is kind of the lightest side. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a little tinting or shading power. So I just added white, which is tinting, but now I'm going to add a little bit of shading power to this. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of this black, only the littlest amount. And I'll tell you that actually black makes a bit of a green when you mix it with yellow. But that's going to create a little bit of shadow for me. And here we have light, we have highlight, we have kind of what is a mid value, and then we have shadow, and then we have cast shadow, which is like thrown shadow, cast or thrown shadow that the object is throwing or casting onto the surface. Then we have the highlight, as I said, and then we have reflected light. You can see that blue, and as it hits the lemon, which is yellow, it makes a secondary color. It makes kind of a green. I don't know if you can see that on the video or not. So that's reflected light. So we have light, we have mid value, which is kind of over here. We have shadow, which are these dark areas. We have cast shadow. We have highlight, and we have reflected light, that light that's bouncing off of the fabric. Okay, so now we're going to go in, we're going to add a little bit of a darker, I just add a little bit of shade to this lemon. I'm going to add a little bit more to this yellow. Ooh, that's a lot more. Turn it down a little bit. And you can see it kind of turns green, which works for this composition. And I'm going to put in these shadow areas. So we're just seeing, first of all, the shape of the shadow and the shape of the light. You see there's a line through the lemon here, so I'm going to show that dividing line. The shadow and light kind of divide here. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit of that blue in the background so we know where we are in the painting. So I'm going to take the palette knife. And that blue is obviously too dark, right? So I'm going to add more white to that blue. Make a really light blue. And that blue actually has more green in it, but I'm just going to start with just this basic ultramarine blue mixed with some white. Almost a sky blue. I'm going to bring a little more blue into that. And we'll tweak it later. But we just want to see what's called the local color, the color that we see the most of, the most immediately. Now I'm going to take my larger filbert here, and I'm going to dip that in the blue. And actually I'm going to dip it in a little bit of solvent and a tiny bit of linseed oil. So it has some flow. That made it pretty wet. You don't want to get too wet, but this will help us get some coverage. And I'm just going to fill in this blue area a little bit. Okay, now I'm making kind of a straight line. I could angle that box a little bit to make it more interesting, but we can see the front of the box has more shadow. I think, you know, I want to add that shadow later to show that the front of the box is shadowed. But for now, let's just kind of get this top surface of the box, the surface that the lemons are sitting on. Okay, and then I think what I'll do is come back and pull a little more blue in, and I'm going to pull a little more white out. I try to put things kind of close to the same place where I put them before, so that I know where I'm going to go when I get into the mixing. So now I've got a little more of a dry blue. I'm not even going to dip in the solvent or the linseed oil right now, and I'm just going to pull down some darker blue across here to show the front of that surface. Again, that's this surface right here. Get some shadow in here. Okay, now I'm going to dip in the solvent just a little bit, a little more wet. And I'm going to use this also to create some cast shadow. So remember that cast means thrown, a thrown shadow from the objects. So I want to show a little bit of that shadow coming off of these objects. Okay. Okay. So at the top, we've got a lot of white. And I don't know if I want to leave it white or not. I think for now I'm going to leave it white. And then what I'd like to do is come back and talk about these lemons just a little bit more, and I'd like to add a little bit more depth to the lemons. So I want to add maybe a little bit of blue-green. So we might put a little bit of green in the lemon. So I'm going to take some of that yellow, bring it over here by the blue, and I'm going to make that secondary color that we made in the first lesson. I'm going to put all of that yellow in there, and I'm going to put even a little bit more yellow in there. And I'm going to bring a little bit more green into the lemons. So now I think I might use my smaller flat brush, which is kind of a long brush that has a straight edge. And I'm going to put some of that green in. And that's that reflected light. It's going to look pretty bright to start with, but we'll tone that down. I'm going to bring some of this yellow back on top of that again, so it becomes more part of the whole. Okay, and then we're going to wrap it up for a second here.